South Africa is still waiting to receive the 31 million vaccine doses it ordered from Johnson & Johnson. It has administered only about 2 million shots of the vaccine so far. On the other hand, Johnson & Johnson has been exporting millions of doses that were bottled and packaged in South Africa for distribution in Europe. Critics say the shortfall in Africa partly reflects a power imbalance between a giant company and desperate countries. And joining me now is Aspen Pharmacare Group's Senior Executive, Dr. Stavrou Nicolaou. Thank you so much for your time this morning. Let's look at this. You know, when you read the article that has shocked quite many, Dr. Glenda Gray says it's like a country is making food for the world and sees its food being shipped off to high resource settings while its citizens starve. Do you agree with this?
Bongi, firstly, thanks very much for having me on your program. And there is no doubt that we've seen significant unevenness of both allocation and distribution of COVID vaccines on the African continent. I think the numbers are well known, and they are certainly telling. So I agree that there has been unevenness.
And this certainly, puts a damper on the continent's fight against COVID-19, especially when you look at this was supposed to be Africa's most important weapon in the fight against coronavirus.
Bongi, look, it still remains the most potent weapon we have at our disposal. I think it's been proven overwhelmingly in various studies, in various settings. You just need to look at Europe over the weekend, right? I was watching rugby, the Springbok test. There were no people in the stadium, right? Then I switched the channel. I'm watching a Liverpool-Norwich game. The stadiums are full. People are unmasked in those stadiums. Now, they're only doing this because they've vaccinated in the UK 50% or more of their populations. We need to get to that same situation here in South Africa. And I think the fact that, and I need to clarify the relationship between Johnson & Johnson and Aspen Pharmacare. Aspen is merely a contract manufacturer producing for and on behalf of Johnson & Johnson. Johnson & Johnson are the ones in a contractual relationship with the various governments of the continents, including our own here in South Africa, that determine the allocation and the distribution of the product. But it is true that having capacity on the continent, like Aspen has, gives you a better chance of bridging that inequality gap in vaccine distribution that we are presently seeing.
And some have said that this move appears to be putting profits before livelihoods.
So, look, I can't really comment on that because, as I said earlier, the relationship is between Johnson & Johnson and the government of South Africa, and J&J also have a relationship with the African Union. I don't know the details. No one at Aspen really knows the finite details of that. I can't really comment on that. What I can say, however, is that Aspen has invested significantly in building sterile capability, which allows us to manufacture, albeit at this point in time, under contract, COVID vaccines for and on behalf of Johnson & Johnson. And, of course, we are looking at the next steps. And President Ramaphosa, in his capacity as African Union chairman at the time, negotiated with the European Union. He's had other multilateral negotiations, all with the purpose of achieving a license for these vaccines for Africa, and that's what we're currently engaged with. But also, more importantly, to build local capacities on the continent. It's quite an indictment that Africa imports just over 99% of its vaccine requirements. And Bongi, I'm not talking just COVID vaccines. I'm talking vaccines in general. We can't be in a position where we're one of the largest consumers of vaccines on the continent, and yet we are producing 1% or less. So that's what we as Aspen are working very hard to try and change, is to build these local capacities and to lessen the dependence on the developed world for vaccines into Africa and into African arms.
I know that you can't talk much on a lot of things around this, but I can't help but really zoom into the contract, especially when you mention it, that when we were being told in various press conferences around the agreements that were signed or being signed or in the process of being finalized with various, suppliers here, we were told that, there are some clauses, the contracts that are making things difficult. Some information may not find itself in the public domain. But when you read an article like this one, where it appears as if our own government as well was pushed to a corner, and it was either you sign or no vaccine, and you're signing whether to say that you can be able to distribute it to other parts of the world, and we're not only going to get it in, the doses and in the number of doses that would really require. Should this information not have been made public when government was briefing the nation to say that these are some of the difficulties that we are faced with when it comes to the negotiations? Because an article like this one really puts things in a very difficult position.
So, Bongi, firstly, it's not that I don't want to comment. It's just that I've never seen the agreement and therefore don't want to speculate on what's in the agreement. What I can say, because this is known publicly, right, I think there are three points in summary around where we are at the moment. I think point one is there's unquestionably an uneven distribution of vaccines globally. Africa is at the back of the queue at the moment. But a second point, Africa is busy changing that. I think that the announcement that President Ramaphosa made in one of his family meetings around 4 or 5 weeks ago, that himself, the African Union and the European Union had reached an agreement. So this was even outside of the hands of the drug companies. Had reached an agreement whereby 60% of what gets produced at the Aspen facility this quarter 3, will go to South Africa and Africa. And then in quarter 4, from October onwards, 100% of what gets produced of the J&J COVID vaccine will remain on African soil. I think that changes the picture quite materially and places Africa in a good position moving forward. But the third and final point I want to make is ultimately we can go back and forth on these agreements, etc. But if we are not the ones with a license producing these products on African soil, then we are unfortunately not going to be the ones allocating and distributing these. So the key takeout message today is that Africa needs to continue investing in building its own capacity. It's exactly what Aspen has done. And I think South Africa now consequently is in a vaccine unconstrained environment. Bongi, we've got the opposite problem now in South Africa, is that we're sitting with too many vaccines and the demand has dropped off. So the challenge in the next few weeks is how do we push up the demand amongst South Africans so that we can start consuming all these vaccines that we are sitting with presently. So it's a fine balancing act, but the most important thing is we need to localize, and localize more, so we don't have a dependency on other countries.
Would you say the strategy that government has put in place to try and persuade those who are still hesitant is working?
Randy, I've got a very nuanced view on vaccine hesitancy. One's got to recognize the demographic idiosyncrasies of our country. Many people in our population find themselves in grinding poverty, and their priorities are to see the day through very often. Many of these people find themselves in rural areas, in townships. And up until now, the campaign has focused on taking people to the vaccine, right? And that works okay in the metropolitan areas where you and I live. It doesn't work that well in the rural areas, the areas that I've just described. So the strategy that government is engaged with all sectors of society is how do we move from a strategy of taking people to the vaccine to now taking the vaccine to the people. And that's going to mean mobilizing communities down at grassroots level. It's going to mean taking mobile clinics into these communities so that we can achieve the objective of vaccinating 35 to 40 million South Africans by the end of the year. I started off this interview by saying, I was quite sad on Saturday. I was watching the Springboks, as I said, empty stadium. Then I watch English football and it's full stadiums. We need to vaccinate as many people as possible in our country so we can get to that situation. It's going to mean changing strategy and getting the vaccine to the people rather than the other way around.
As a final question, then let's go back to, what we were talking about around this article. Do you think that the TRIPS waiver will help to ensure and address the issues of equity?
Rangi, the TRIPS waiver is a step in the right direction, okay, but it's not the end-all and be-all. What you actually need here is you need technology transfer arrangements or partnerships, and you also need know-how transfers. It's no good saying, well, here's the intellectual property, I'm giving you rights to it, but you don't have the ability technologically or know-how or the skills to produce a vaccine. So the waiver is an important step in the right direction. However, what is more important for me is these partnerships like the continent is developing with Johnson & Johnson, where you've got a company that comes in, assists to build capacity, then takes it to the next step, as President Ramaphosa said, which is a licensing arrangement, giving access to technologies, know-how, and skills as well.
All right. Thank you so much for your time. I know that, we put you in a corner there, but thank you for your time tonight, in fact, this morning.